Hello, and welcome to Rough Edges Podcast with Sarah I. Fox. In this podcast, I will guide you through my faith and mental health journey to dispel the stigma surrounding mental illness and to create an empowering resource for those who wish to discover more about these topics. I pray that this podcast will not only bless you, but that it will bring growth and healing to our communities. Hey there, Sarah here. Before you dive into today's episode, I just wanted to say thank you so much for your support and for hitting that play button. If you want to expand on that support, here are 3 ways that you can do so. 1. Leave a review. If anything in today's episode resonated with you, or you want to share how the podcast changed your life, you can do so by leaving a review on Apple Podcasts or Podchaser. 2. Check out our shop. The Rough Edges shop is a faith-based, women of color-owned online shop where you can get a variety of products from tote bags, journals, t-shirts, crew necks, and more. 20% of the proceeds go to a mental health organization. So check it out at roughedgespodcast.com/shop. 3. Connect on social media. Rough Edges is on a variety of social media platforms, including Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, and more. If you want to connect outside of listening to the podcast episodes, you can do so on those platforms. If you have any more questions or want more information on the ways that I've just discussed, you can check out the episode description or stay to the end for more information. Now, enjoy your episode. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Rough Edges. Today, I am joined by a very special guest. Her name is Melody Murray. Melody is a licensed marriage and family therapist and a child mental health specialist. She's also an expert in childhood trauma, family dynamics, and suicidal ideations. She has a private practice which counsels individuals 14 and up. She was also a school district mental health liaison for students and families in crisis. She is also co-hosting community conversations in order to normalize and validate the human experience. She has 4 years as a hospital ER and mental health evaluator, assessing homicidal and suicidal patients. She was also a former reality TV producer and director, and she was also a stand-up comic in LA for 5 years. And she's also a former child's show co-host. This fall, she's releasing her first book on relationship estrangement titled Mourning the Living. And that book will look at the inside realm of adolescent suicidal thoughts and behaviors. Welcome, Melody.
Hello. Well, thank you. Thank you for welcoming me.
Yes, I'm so excited to have you on the podcast. And before we dive into our topic for today, I want to get to know you a little bit better. So, what are 3 things that you cannot live without and why?
Ooh, I can't live without sushi. I can't live without lip gloss and television. Television has been my ride or die since I was a kid. So, yeah, there we go.
Yes. No, I resonate with like all of those, especially like the movies. I love movies as well. Like they are also the bedrock of my childhood too. So I really love that. So thanks for that.
TV raised me, TV it just is what it is. And I always think it's funny when people are like, oh, I don't watch television. Well, congratulations. I watch it and I love it and I'm not ashamed of it. So
yeah,
screw you.
Same here. Absolutely. I have the same sentiments. So I really want to know, like, what really started you off on, like, your profession in the mental health field, and particularly in marriage and family? Like, what led you to become a licensed marriage and family therapist and child mental health specialist?
It's a It's a journey. It is definitely a story that it's not something that I ever thought about doing until I decided to do it.
Mm.
I'd worked in television for several years in front of the camera, behind the camera, and I did two shows back to back that were really intense, and they literally changed my life. And still wasn't thinking about being a therapist. One of the shows, the star of the show, this was a reality show, and the star of the show was doing her own personal therapy on camera. And I was fascinated by that because therapy is such an intimate experience, and she's doing it on camera. And I grew up in the South where you don't go to therapy, number one, and number two, you don't air your dirty laundry. What happens behind these doors stays behind these doors. That's how I was raised. And so I was fascinated by that. And then it went from that fascination to utter disgust because I realized what they were doing. There were so many unethical things that were happening in this particular project. And I felt like the star of the show was exploiting herself, believe it or not. There were so many things that they seemed to be dancing around in these therapy sessions where I just thought that, it's obvious what's going on with her. It's obvious what happened to her. Why is no one talking about this? And I ended up quitting that show because I felt there was just so many things that were going on that were just ridiculous, and reached out to an old boss, said, I'm in a really crappy situation. What you got? That's the way TV works. You get your jobs based on who you know. So I reached out to a former boss and said, I got to get out of here. Do you have anything coming up? And he's like, absolutely. So I left that show, quit, and was able to start on another show 2 days later. And that was a show that really solidified that I need to do something else. And that experience was phenomenal. But there was so much that was going on amongst the cast members, and they were all young adults. I wasn't that much older than them. And I thought that this particular show was so fascinating because it was a bunch of absolute strangers living under one roof together. And it was fascinating to see how an event would happen and how they would all handle it very differently. And I loved kind of predicting what they would do and how they would respond to certain things. And so I just had this moment. I had one of those moments, one of those life-changing moments where I thought, I need to do something more with my life. I can't be in this job where I'm putting the camera on people in their worst moments. I want to be a part of helping people heal, helping people feel better. And so I had a come to Jesus conversation with myself. And it just dawned on me, like, you're going to be a therapist. That's what I need to do. You're going to change everything and be a therapist. But before I did that, I reached out to my own therapist and I said, hey, I'm thinking about becoming a therapist. Am I too crazy? And he goes, no, I think that you would be brilliant at this. And whatever letters you need a recommendation, I will write them for you. And that was it. And it was a shock for a lot of people to hear that I was leaving this very lucrative career. But I just felt like my time on this earth needs to mean something. And I really want to be able to help people feel better because I'd been in my own therapy and I felt better and I wanted to pass on that healing. And so that was it. I went to graduate school and went and got hours and then got licensed. And I've been doing this for the last 11 years now.
Wow. Oh my gosh. I love all of that. And I especially love the bridge between the mental health and the media, because a lot of the things that you spoke about, especially with like the first example of the star doing therapy on TV, it's just like not realistic in terms of like the actual mechanisms of therapy, like off camera, because a lot of the TV is like glamorized, like you were saying, they omit certain things.
You have to be visual. TV is a visual medium. And so production crews, like, we want to make sure that whatever is people are looking at, they're not going to get bored and change the channel. So you have to make sure things are physical or not physical. You have to make sure things are visual. And when you're doing therapy, for the most part, you're just talking. It's not sexy. It's not glamorous. It's just talking to each other. And so I felt that, I'm glad you picked up on that, because it's the truth it's the truth. There's a lot that is lost when you're trying to make a scene be entertaining for people, when the authenticity of the scene is something that's so much more intimate and delicate.
Yeah, no, for sure. And especially like when dealing with mental health, because in most media, it's like mental health, like it paints this picture as like it could be really, really ugly, or it could be really, really like, oh, she's fun, even though she's kind of manic, but she's like creative and productive, like all like the backwards way of like just portraying that. So I really love how you also touched on, even behind the camera, where you were just like, putting the camera on these people as they were going through some really personal things. And I just love how that was like one of the factors that kind of pushed you into doing therapy, because you're like, this is a private moment. And this person's being vulnerable in front of like on national television. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I appreciate that too.
I did one of those projects. I could have gotten fired. There was a young man that was really having a tough moment with a family member, and I chose not to put it on camera. And I could have gotten fired for that. And years later, the boss that I had for that particular project, he and I were friends, and he and I happened to be just hanging out. And I told him, yeah, do you remember this moment? There were kind of holes in the situation. Like I chose not to put that on camera because it was a really delicate situation, and he understood. But it was years later, after the fact. But there's this line that you sometimes feel you need to cross to get the good content, to get a great scene, to get a good soundbite. And I was a part of that for a long time. And then it just didn't, maybe it was my own maturity. Maybe it was my own journey with therapy, because I had been in therapy too, that it just didn't feel right. It just felt wrong. And I wanted to be on the other side of that.
Yeah, no, and I respect that. I really do respect like the way that you honored someone else's vulnerability, because that's the thing that TV doesn't show us. It doesn't show us like people being vulnerable in a way that's like not staged and not like dramatized.
Violent.
Yeah.
Violent. I mean, these big, huge fights, these verbal, these spats and these outbursts, that's violence. Even if someone isn't exchanging blows, being verbally violent, people tune in for those things, and those are vulnerable moments. It seems tough. Unfortunately, our society has normalized violent outbursts as communication and as okay, because we have not allowed people to be vulnerable without making fun of them, without criticizing them and judging you being vulnerable. And so, people are boxed into these corners where it's like, I can't just say, hey, I'm confused, I'm really sad, I'm tired, I'm upset, I'm overwhelmed. We don't allow people to do that. And so they yell and they scream, or they shoot these mass shootings, or they get into these huge fights, but we allow that. So we are conditioning people to communicate in these really violent ways. And then whenever they're violent, we go, where did this come from? I don't understand this. But everybody plays a part in that.
That is so true. It's like, as you say, like it normalizes that type of behavior. So when it does happen in real life, people are like, oh, what's wrong with her? Like she's just in one of her moods. Like, no, it's very serious.
Is triggered, and that's why they're having such a strong reaction. They are triggered, and there's a moment that's happening right in front of this person that reminds them of a horrible situation that happened in their past. That thing did not get healed, so the scab was just ripped off in public, and so now this person is responding. They're reacting, and it looks completely blown up, and it's really over the top. And this is a vulnerable moment, but no one is seeing it as that. But it's the vulnerable, the trigger, the big reaction is being triggered, and it's connected to trauma. It is a vulnerable moment, and it's on camera, and it's going to last forever, so that, you know, bosses can see it, and children can see it, and parents can see it. But, you know, people are now exploiting themselves, and they're like, well, as long as I have a big fat paycheck, it's all worth it. Is it though?
Yeah, that's a really good point. And that kind of like brings me into a question that I wanted to ask in terms of just unrealistic portrayals of like relationships. Cause I know that you specialize in like the family dynamic, adolescent, like, and I know that you probably deal with a lot of relationship like issues and things like that. And so media often gives us an unrealistic portrayal of relationships. Like everything has to be wrapped up in a nice little bow, happily ever after. So, how have you seen the impact of these unrealistic expectations in your work?
Oh, wow. I see it a lot when it comes to working with teenagers and young adults, where their idea of what life is supposed to be is, it's unrealistic, it's skewed. And social media has a big part to do with that. And television does as well, where people assume that, oh, you know, if you happen to be an introvert and you have one or two friends, but you see people partying with huge groups of people on a TV show or in social media posts, and you really feel bad about yourself, you can feel ashamed of yourself. But most people don't have hordes of friends. We just don't. But if that's your only outlet, and with a lot of introverts that is, you assume that I'm doing life wrong. I'm doing it wrong because I don't have what's being shown to me. I don't have that. And I in conversations with my teenagers, you know, I've had talks with them about it. When I work with teenagers, I work with the parents too, because, and a lot of parents don't understand that that's necessary. You know, with little children too, a lot of parents will just go, here's my kid, fix them. And I'm always like, nope, get your ass over here, because your kid is who they are because of you. And they're not going to be quote unquote fixed. No one's broken. So, you know, no one's broken. We're all a little bent, but nobody's broken. And you're going to be a part of the healing of this child because you were a part of whatever went down with this kid and however they see themselves. So you have to be a part of this. And, you know, I love talking to teenagers. They're my absolute favorite population, because you're a part of their development, how they interact with each other teenagers, with their parents, with their friends, but more importantly, with themselves. And I think that's, you know, it's a privilege to be invited into someone's life. Like, I really feel like so honored when someone chooses me as their therapist, because it's an intimate dynamic. It's so intimate, and you're opening yourself up to someone, and your fingers are crossed, and you're enthusiastic, and you're scared, but yet you're hopeful. And I want to be a part of someone's healing. I want someone to feel better as fast as possible. And, you know, part of that is normalization, normalizing what your current situation is. And a lot of times that's contradictory. Usually it's contradictory to the media that they're taking in. And to make, you know, helping people understand that you're not doing this wrong. You're absolutely fine. What most people are going through is what you're going through. What you're going through is what most people are going through. But our world has become so much more isolated, you know, especially post-pandemic. So isolated, and people are still afraid to get back together again, that, you know, people are still thinking that they're doing everything wrong, and they're not. They're being human, and they're trying to get through. And I wish people would open up more and feel more comfortable being vulnerable. I hate saying I wish people would be vulnerable more. That's crap, because it takes trust in order to be vulnerable. And we are all constantly judging each other and criticizing each other. So why would somebody feel comfortable being vulnerable? Because whenever they are, someone's talking crap about them and calling them a simp, or calling them a wimp, or calling them, you know, all these horrible things. So then people shrink back up. They isolate, they withdraw again. And parents don't realize that's how the kid sees it. So it's like you have to say everything. Don't abbreviate it and just leave it at that and assume the kid knows where you're going in your mind. Say all the words. Say all the things. Yes, everybody's going through this. And you've got friends that are going through this too. And this is probably how they're getting through it. Here are ways that you can get through it. Let's figure out what is that magic formula for you.
No, I couldn't agree more, because it's like it is very isolating when you're seeing like your friends and it looks like on social media or wherever it is that they're, putting their life out there. It seems like they have it all together. They have like the secret recipe that's going to make everything better in life. And like you said, it's not that. It's just their coping mechanisms may or may not be as healthy as they may seem. And that's okay.
If they have them at all.
No, that's very true.
Mm-hmm.
I appreciate like what you said, especially about us not being broken, but we're bent a little, like
we're not broken. I feel like if we're still breathing, if we still have the ability to walk, talk, and see, we are not broken. We are a little bent and we can fix that, but we're not broken. And I think that sometimes people think that way. And it's just, that breaks my heart when people feel that they are beyond hope, beyond healing. And a lot of people think that way, but we're not broken. But just there are certain moments that we get a little dented up.
Yeah, I love that. I'm going to use that with your permission, And also, I wanted to talk about your upcoming book. Yeah. It's called Mourning the Living. And I want to know, like, what inspired that title and how was the writing process?
It's deep, girl. Okay, so the full title is Mourning the Living, When the Loved One You've Lost is Still Here. Typically, we associate mourning with someone who has died. This is grieving a relationship, mourning a connection that was really close to you, but that person may live down the street. That person may be your father. They're still here, but I have to grieve who you are not in my life right now. Or I have to mourn who you aren't in my life right now. And so it was born out of a personal connection. I have an older sister who struggles with substance abuse. And growing up, she was my protector. She was my champion. She was my favorite person. And, life became too tough for her. And she suffered trauma after trauma after trauma. And she couldn't find her way out of it. And she's been an addict for several years. And so our relationship has evolved. Unfortunately, we're at the point that we don't speak at all anymore. But I had to create boundaries to protect myself as I interacted with her. And that meant I had to stop interacting with her. But I had to grieve my sister. I had to mourn who we used to be together, who she used to mean to me. And it was hard. I mean, it's still hard to this day. It is still hard. But that was the genesis, my relationship with her and the evolution of that relationship. And the book itself is about a bunch of different relationship dynamics. So each chapter is a different dynamic. There's a chapter for mothers, fathers, children, partners, friends, and even our own personal identity. And there are stories that I solicited stories from people who had to mourn a relationship that wasn't going to be what they hoped it would be, or can't be what it used to be. And how you need to either create boundaries, sever ties altogether, or shift your expectations. And then I also talk about within each chapter, I talk about how I've helped clients get through the exact same situations. What are the techniques that they used? What are the interventions that I suggested? And helping people create the boundaries so that you can either coexist. And that's what boundaries are. Boundaries aren't, hey, I don't ever want to see you again. Boundaries are, I need to create some rules so that you and I can coexist and we can both feel respected. That's what boundaries are. But sometimes those relationships, there's just no way that they're going to work and you have to sever the tie. And so in the book, we talk about all the different emotions that come with the decision making. Like, can I keep going with this person or do I need to end the relationship altogether? And it teaches people how to make that decision and what you can do for yourself. But it also talks about why is it so hard to create boundaries with people? Why are we in this position where we are people pleasing? Why have we been taught that love is transactional? Why have I been taught that I'm supposed to hug all my aunts and uncles at every holiday gathering, yet half of them molested me? It goes deep. It really, really goes deep into family dynamics and who has poured into you, how you see the world and how you see yourself.
Oh my God, I can't wait to read that book.
For you to read it.
Yes.
Girl, writing this book was so hard. It was so incredibly hard. And I've started and stopped multiple books over the years. This is the first one that I've finished. And it has been a years long process, like 3.5 years of working on this book. And I share personal stories in it. Like, I'm divorced. I share a story about myself and my ex-husband. I share a story about me and my sister, me and my mother, me and a couple of friends, and just like, how have I navigated these really tough situations? Because I do believe self-disclosure can be really, really helpful for people. You know, a lot of times people think that therapists are perfect people and we have it all figured out. That nothing could be further from the truth. I love telling people that the majority of therapists, not like a high majority, I'd go in the 80s percentile, therapists had really abusive childhoods. They had non-existent parents, or they had emotional neglect from parents, even if they were in the household. Therapists are therapists because they've healed. They've confronted their traumas. They've healed from their traumas. And now they want to teach other people how to heal.
Yes. Oh, wow. I can't wait till it comes out. And I'm definitely going to pick me up a copy because I need to mourn some living too.
It's a lot. Like, family estrangement has really increased over the years. I mean, a lot of it started out politically. You know, who are you voting for? I'm not voting for that person. I'm voting for that person. And then LGBTQ issues. And then just being on different sides of different issues, because more and more people are feeling empowered to express themselves and to be out there in life. And so it has really torn families apart. I mean, COVID, you know, tore families apart. Like, are you vaccinated or you're not vaccinated? You are vaccinated. So these lines have been drawn in the sand. And it's like, I love this person, but I can't stand this person. We are so different. And how do you handle this thing? I loved you so hard and so much, but we're so different now. And what are these feelings I'm feeling? So, you know, managing all the different feelings that come from, I love you and I'm sad that you're gone, but I don't like what you stand for. And what do I do with that?
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with that. And it's just so difficult to do that because there are just so many like personal ties that you have with that person. Like, especially like in a friendship where it's like it starts off great, you guys are both equally vulnerable, and then all of a sudden it's just like
equally silly.
yeah. Yeah, for sure.
You know what I found in talking to people when it comes to friendships? Friendships are harder in a lot of situations. It's harder to mourn friendships than it is partners. Because we expect a relationship to end. Most of our relationships end. They just do. They end in breakups, they end in divorce until you find that forever person, if you find that person, that forever person. But we all pretty much understand that a romantic relationship is going to end at some point. We do not expect our friendships to end. And growth is not something that is important to a lot of people. That is also a hard truth to understand, especially if you are a growth-minded person. You like being challenged, you want to evolve, and you come across people that you truly, truly love, and they have zero desire to hear anything different. They don't want to have their viewpoints challenged at all. That's tough. And when that comes in the form of a friend that you absolutely love and adore, and you realize that they think very differently about something that you find very important, that is literally heartbreaking for a lot of people. And it takes a long time to get over, if you get over it.
Yeah. No, that's a very valid point. And it's just like not everybody that goes with you is going to grow with you, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And it's like you have all these different like dreams and hopes for yourself. And I've even had moments where it's like if something like really traumatic happens, or that's where you see where your true friends are, because I've had people who I've told my bipolar diagnosis to, and then it's like a couple weeks later, no communication. Yeah, so
Can
I'm
step
like,
on you.
yeah, yeah.
And did you take that personally?
Oh yeah, yeah.
Mhm. And in a lot of ways, I mean, it's hard not to, but a good way to look at it is that a lot of people don't have a growth mindset, and a lot of people would prefer to be judgmental instead of curious. And so instead of going, Sarah, what's that feel like for you? How do you navigate life? What do you do? How can I help? They just shut it down because of their inadequacies, because of their limited capabilities to be able to hold space for somebody else. But we internalize it when we actually shouldn't, because typically it's the other person's inability to be strong and to be open and to have a dialogue. They just shut down.
Yeah. No,
Mm-hmm.
that's true. That's very true. And I didn't think about it like that in the moment. Like I'm pretty good about it now, but
Mm-hmm.
like yeah, it was tough in the beginning for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I was with a neighbor, and he and I are creating a friendship, and we were having dinner, and he told me some deep stuff in this dinner, deep stuff, diagnosis stuff, and I was like, "What? He's just throwing that out there." And I felt privileged. I felt so honored that he felt comfortable with me, that he felt he was just going to put it out there. But it also was a testament to his work on himself, where he threw it out there and was like, I don't give a crap what she thinks about this. This is me. And I'm going to put that out there to see who she is. I mean, you can choose. We get to decide how we feel about everything, how we interpret everything. You can choose to internalize it and go, I'm at fault, I'm wrong, I'm less than, or you can go, wait a second, where's this person coming from? How do they view this? And so whenever he was telling me this, I thought, wow, he's so confident and he's so strong. Number one, he's done a lot of work on himself, so he doesn't care what I think about this. This is about him. He's saying his diagnosis. He's cool with it. He's made peace with it. What a strong person. And now he's sharing it with me. Like, he trusts me. I feel honored.
Yeah.
That's how I chose to look at the situation. But some people would go, oh my God, he wants something from me. He's going to expect me to have to do something for him. Or what does that say about me that I'm friends with this kind of person? Like, we get to decide how we think about everything that comes our way. Everything. So what choices are you going to make? Are you going to put a positive spin on it? Are you going to reframe a situation? Or are you going to just see it in a negative light? But we have the power to choose how we see everything that comes our way.
Yes, most definitely. I can't wait to get your book and to learn more. But I also wanted to kind of ask you another question, kind of going back to like the media part of it. And you kind of touched on it a little bit, but I still want to know, like, if you could change one aspect, or maybe two, one or two aspects of how media portrays mental health or relationships, what would you change?
Whoa, that's a big question. I wish that things could be seen at a slower pace. We are a society that is all about instant gratification. I want it now. I need to see the flash. I need to see the glitz. I need to know now. And I wish that things could be paced out in a more realistic way so that people didn't expect to feel better overnight. People didn't expect to have things revealed to them instantly, that people didn't expect to fall in love immediately with someone or to have immediate acceptance from someone. I wish that things that the slower pace of things were given more respect and, come into light more. Just the realistic things, the realistic way how things transpire. I wish that's how things would go. I also wish that we were shown models of contemplation or confusion, the in between, from something happening and then something else happening, that in between phase of trying to figure things out, trying to figure out, how do I feel about this thing? Do I want to do something about this thing? And now, what is that doing going to look like? The in between, instead of immediately jumping from that has happened and now I'm going to do this. I wish there was more space in between those things, because we don't have to make a decision immediately. We don't. You're not the president. You're not an astronaut. You're not a heart surgeon. If you're not those three things, chill out.
Yes.
Most of us are feeling like we have to immediately respond to something. We have to immediately make a decision. We don't. I wish we could just slow things down in life to show the process between something has happened to me and what am I going to do? How am I going to respond to that thing? Also, here's something else that I wish was different. Like, when it comes to our relationship with ourselves, I wish that there was that kind of conversation. We are so focused on how we interact with everybody else, our parents, our friends, boyfriends, girlfriends, whatever. What about our relationship with ourselves? How are we taking care of ourselves? What boundaries do we have with ourselves? How do we love on and accept ourselves? I wish that was portrayed in some way. How the importance of our relationship with ourselves, it is so much more important than our relationship with anybody else.
Yes, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
No, for sure. And I really, really, man, I also wish, like, especially when you said like the contemplative part, because it's true. In movies, it's just like they're dealing with a huge crisis. And then in like the last 15 minutes, it's all wrapped up. And it's like, oh, okay, hold on. The crisis lasted the first hour, 30 minutes.
And now it's all fixed.
Yeah, it's like, it's very, very, it kind of makes you think like, okay, what is the process? Like, if I'm not going through the process as quickly as that person is, then am I ever going to get through this at all?
Am I messing up? Why can't I make a decision really, really fast? Why don't
Right.
I know how I feel right now?
Right. Yeah.
It's false.
Just,
it's really false.
yeah.
And like you were talking about earlier, and how there's a tendency to tie things up in a bow. I love those stories where you have no idea really how things come together. You don't know. They had a huge blow up, they had a huge fight, and then the last scene is they meet at a coffee shop and they just sit down to talk. There's no, when they fall in love and he proposes and they get married and there's a wedding, and then there's in the credits, there's a picture of all the children and the white picket fence.
Yeah.
That's what the show, what was it, Schitt's Creek? Have you seen Schitt's Creek?
I haven't seen it, but I've seen clips.
Oh my God, it's so good. It's so good. I love that show so much that I've literally seen the entire series 6 times.
Wow.
Every single episode 6 times. That's how good it is. And there are a couple of storylines that happen where you just don't know what it's going to be. But you see the process that the person has come to this, they've made this decision, and it's a big question mark. And that's it. That's all you're going to get. There's always going to be multiple factors in all the decisions that we make, and decisions aren't so cut and dry.
Right. Really, I just want to be able to see more of those things portrayed, especially when dealing with mental health, because that's not like a one and done type of thing. Like, I followed these amount of steps and I'm okay. Like, it's an up and down type of process.
It
Yeah.
really is. So I'm actually too, as I'm launching my book, I've actually created a workbook as well. And the workbook is about like, how do you heal yourself? This is if you have no access to a therapist, you don't have the funds, you don't have the access at all. What can you do to help yourself feel better? And It's multiple steps, and it's a workbook in the sense that I give you prompts, like these are the things that you need to consider, and these are the things that you need to incorporate in your life, and then you write down what are you going to try, and then you see, does this work? Cool, keep it going. That didn't work, let's find something else that's going to work. And then as different things keep happening in your life, maybe you got a breakup, you got a death, you lose a job, you keep going to this workbook. And you don't have to keep inventing the wheel. As life happens to you, you don't have to start all over. Go back to this workbook and go, this, and this worked. I'm going to do that again. And now I learned about this new thing. I'm going to add that in so that you're learning yourself. You're becoming more and more self-aware, and you've got the stuff that works for you, because we all have a formula. It's just about what works for you. It's about figuring out what of those things that work for you. And maybe it's, maybe it's going on a run. Maybe it's yoga. Maybe it's journaling. Maybe it's writing songs. Maybe it's, jumping out of an airplane. Like, everybody's different. Maybe it's therapy 3 times a week. I don't know. But it's important for us to take the time to figure out what works for us, knowing that works for somebody else may not work for you, and that is okay. But figuring out our magic formula is really, really important. And then also knowing, just as life progresses, those certain things that work for you at a certain time in your life is not going to work for you anymore.
Right. Mm-hmm. That's crucial.
Well, you know what, Sarah, it's so amazingly crucial. The adults that I work with are high functioning adults with childhood trauma that they don't register as trauma. They developed coping skills in their childhood to be safe in their environments. Those coping skills were what they had access to at the time. Self-harm, food, a lot of different things. Sometimes it's promiscuity. Those are things that you could do because you didn't have a car, you couldn't pick up and leave, you couldn't move, you're stuck. So, but then you hold on to those things and you do them into adulthood, but you don't have the same environment. You have access to different coping skills. But a lot of times we hold on to that young stuff, that old stuff, when we need new ways of taking care of ourselves. And so that is something that I work with my adults with a lot, where they're just like, I've got the house, I've got the kids, I got the partner, I got the job, and I'm miserable. Why? Because you were told that you needed to get all those things in order to be happy. And we all know that's crap. Those, like, you got to do this and you got to do that. That is only meant to keep you in debt and to keep you as a taxpayer in our society. Our society is not meant to keep us happy and healthy. You have to be really, really honest with yourself so that you can take care of yourself better. Figure out what is that magical healing formula for you.
Yes, absolutely. It was so good. And Melody, I thank you so much for joining me today. Mm-hmm. I have one final question for you before we wrap up. But what advice or words of encouragement do you have for somebody who is struggling with mental health?
Be patient with yourself. Give yourself space to learn who you are, and give yourself grace to heal what you've been through. Mm-hmm. Take the time to love yourself. Take the time to be curious about who you are and how you've gotten where you are. Be curious. Don't be judgmental. Be curious and love on yourself and accept yourself, even when it's hard. Because a lot of times we're judgmental because other people were judgmental with us first, and that's what we learned. We learned to be judgmental. We learned to be critical. We learned to be mean to ourselves because other people were mean to us first. Allow yourself to be challenged so that you can see things differently, see yourself differently, and learn to love yourself in a new way. Patience and curiosity.
Yes, I love that. Well, Melody, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast today. And where can people find you?
Sure. My website and my IG are the same. MelodyLMFT.com is the website. Melody LMFT, that stands for Licensed Marriage and Family Therapist. That's me on Instagram, and Melody Murray LMFT on Facebook.
All right. Well, thank you so much again. And everyone, stay tuned for more empowering episodes on Rough Edges. Thank you for listening to another episode of Rough Edges Podcast with Sarah I. Fox. If you want more exciting updates on the podcast, follow on Instagram at rough.edges.podcast. You can also visit the official podcast website at www.roughedgespodcast.com. Thanks again for listening and have a wonderful day.